Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 411 Ground and Pound MMA podcast, your weekly look into the wide, wacky, wonderful world of mixed martial arts, all of those in varying degrees. I'm Robert Winfrey. I am your host for this show. On the docket this evening, a review of last night's pay-per-view event, UFC 240, which was a lot of meh. I can't really spin it any other way than that. Meh. We'll also have a preview of next week for UFC on ESPN 5. They got a weird start time. I think there's another larger sporting event in the evening because the first prelim for that, I believe, will start at noon Eastern. So for those of you who want to watch next Saturday, don't forget, very early start time. And then a little bit of news. Hasn't been a whole lot of news so far this last week. Been pretty sedate. I'm waiting for something crazy to happen. But until then, that's basically what we're going to be looking at for this particular episode. However, after a couple of weeks back working at San Diego Comic-Con, Jeff Harris is back with us. Jeff, how are you this evening?
I'm 1 year older, but 1 year even less mature. Thank you.
Alrighty, let's go ahead and jump into UFC 240 last night, starting with the main event. Max Holloway defeats Frankie Edgar via unanimous decision, 50-45, which was my score, 49-46, which I don't agree with, but I can at least see an argument for Frankie maybe getting the first. And 48-47 for Max Holloway, which is utter horseshit.
Yeah, there's moments in the later round. Honestly, I don't even feel like he won the first. I felt the first round was more like just one of those 10-10 rounds.
It could have been. That's probably a more accurate that might be a more accurate representation of the round.
Because I felt like Holloway was almost dictating the pace, but I felt both guys were there wasn't anything really notable in the first round at all.
No, the biggest stuff that happened was Max really finding his distance and timing on some of those rear hand uppercuts that really kind of jacked Frankie's head around.
But Frankie did okay in the first round too. So I felt like I feel like we need to see more 10-10s anyway, and I felt like that was a margin. That was a 10-10 to me.
That's fair. I don't disagree with that.
You scored it 50-45.
I did.
So what did you think was BS? 48-47?
48-47. There's no way Frankie won 2 rounds. Absolutely none. At best, he got the first. At absolute best. Every other round, no. And I don't care how much Joe Rogan screams about pointless takedowns against the fence after you get badly hurt. No.
He didn't do anything with that takedown, and he got that takedown didn't override Max.
He was badly hurt that round. Max really tagged him.
Yeah.
I don't think there's an argument for Frankie winning a round apart from maybe edging out the first.
4? What was round 4 like? I think that was a decent round for Edgar.
Edgar had a pretty decent, I think, like 3 minutes of round 4, but the 2 minutes that Max really kind of dictated were absolutely the most impactful of that round.
Yeah.
No, I don't.
Yeah. 10-10. My score for round 1 was a 10-10. I'm sorry.
That's fair. No, that's fair. I don't think that's inaccurate.
Just because I feel like when it's just so close and I feel like neither guy really got the edge over one another, I feel like it should be a 10-10.
That's kind of what they're there for.
Also, in the first round, Frankie did score some good leg kicks that did damage throughout the fight.
Yeah, I don't know what it is. He was landing a few of those, but I don't know if Max is just really very well conditioned to deal with those, but he didn't seem to care at all.
If Frankie did more with the leg kicks instead of shooting for takedowns, he could have had more success in this fight.
The leg kicks maybe, but I think his takedown game, it's as good as it's always been, but he just was up against a guy who really knows how to was prepared for it.
With Connor, Holloway's takedown defense has been one of his best attributes. Because guys can't bully. Because guys can't outgrapple him and they can't bully him around and toss him around. He doesn't let anyone do that to him ever.
No, and just shooting on him desperately over and over again is a recipe for disaster. It's why Frankie kind of took the approach that he did.
I mean, Frankie had footwork. He had speed last night. He tried to do his in and out sort of technique. His boxing looked sharp. He just the power is a big thing for him because and the range. Holloway had the better. He dictated the range last night. He used his distance. Frankie just wasn't able to get the volume, you know?
Yeah, there was a lot of things that Frankie, I think, struggled with in this fight. One was just the distance management of Holloway. Holloway kept him where he wanted him pretty much the entire time. Max's jab did a pretty serious number on Edgar's face. And anytime Edgar would try to close distance, if Max didn't want him to, he just punched him in the face a few times and got him to back off.
Honestly, I think Volkanovski's going to be a tougher fight for Max.
He will.
If that fight happens.
It should. He will be if they make the fight.
I mean, Frankie has fought bigger guys for most of his career and had success against bigger guys, but none of them have been quite on the level of a Max Holloway. So.
And anytime he did fight someone who was roughly on par with Max, he lost.
Who?
Oh, Aldo.
Oh.
By way of example. I mean, look, Max, at this point in time, better than Aldo. That's been definitively proven.
There are similar, I'm sure Holloway studied the Aldo fights and the Ortega fight a lot for this fight. This fight reminded me a lot of Edgar's fights with Aldo.
Yeah, he couldn't find a good punching lane, which is one of the things he really requires. His footwork, while it's good about keeping him mobile and moving around, whenever he tries to actually close distance, he does so on straight lines more so than on angles. That's one of the reasons he kept getting stood up by Holloway's jab.
Have one punch knockout power. He doesn't have a lot of.
Frankie's not a big puncher. He just never has been.
I mean, he's had knockouts.
He's had a couple, but
those are rare. Those were rare when those happened to him.
I mean, I think the only two like actual real, concussive blow stoppages on his record I can think of off the top of my head are the third Maynard fight. And then the Mendez fight.
Yeah.
I mean, he has a few other, kind of TKOs on his record. I mean, the third BJ Penn fight.
Maynard fight was after he took another first round beating again.
Yep.
Overall, a good performance by Max Holloway. Not really a great fight, but it sort of expands his legacy. It builds his legacy. It builds his resume. He has another win over a former champion, a guy who's been very successful at 2 weight classes. And Frankie's been legit top 5 at featherweight, despite the losses for the past several, really since he moved down to featherweight. So
I think it's only recently he dropped out of it. Yeah.
I mean. Frankie's only losses in the last several years are to Aldo, Ortega, and now Holloway. So you have the two most dominant champions in the history of the division and Brian Ortega. With this win, Max Holloway has now 13 wins in a row at featherweight.
He has tied the longest active winning streak in a division. Both Jon Jones and Demetrius Johnson also have 13 wins. Jones at 205 and DJ flyweight. If we limit it to the UFC, which is where this is limited, Aldo had
7.
I think he had 7, yeah, because they were all title defenses.
Okay.
So let me double check. Because he came in at 129, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, he had 7.
Okay, so if you count his WEC wins, which were all at featherweight.
It's much longer. It doubles that, I think.
15.
I think
wow.
14 or 15.
I don't really care about pound for pound, but I mean, you have to consider Holloway an all-time great at this point.
His skill set is quite remarkable.
Because this is, I mean, look, the only other UFC featherweight do we even, other than Aldo, was Conor McGregor, and Conor never defended the title, you know? So
I don't consider Conor an all-time great featherweight. I
Well-
consider him an all-time relevant fighter, and you could argue a great fighter.
Well, look, Conor did have his first run at featherweight, and he did knock out Aldo at featherweight in 13 seconds. So,
I mean, again, I'm not denying his success.
It's a pretty great run as a featherweight.
But for me, at least, and some of this will vary from person to person, he just doesn't have the body of work at featherweight.
I mean, what does it say about Holloway? He beat a championship Aldo twice.
Finished him twice.
Aldo is still really a top contender.
Still is right now. I mean, he's not going to fight Max again because there's no point to it. But still one of the best. He's still one of the 3 best featherweights in the world.
Right. So you have that. Holloway not only beat him twice, finished him twice. Beat Frankie Edgar and beat Brian Ortega, who was, a really heavy, in a lot of ways, a heavy favorite going into that fight. So you had this young, undefeated contender. And now hopefully the fight with Volkanovski is going to happen. That's a great. I like that matchup even better than this one. That's the fight I really wanted here.
Ditto.
But ironically, Volkanovski was apparently healthy and ready to go last night, and they had him as the backup main event fighter.
He did officially weigh in just in case, and weighed, I think, 144.5. So good on him.
He confirmed he worked out a deal with the UFC to get paid to show up and weigh in on Friday.
Good for him. Get paid, man.
I mean, now, on one hand, I respect UFC for doing that because this fight had fallen off, twice or 3 times before?
Twice.
So, at least twice. So, it was good to have a backup guy for a matchup like this, so they have something ready to go. But this is really the fight that should have happened. At the time, I thought Volkanovski was hurt, and I was like, okay, this fight is available now. I guess you might as well. But apparently, Volkanovski healed up and was able to make weight. So I'm a little annoyed because that's a fight we should have gotten in the first place.
I don't know why the UFC really insisted on making this fight at this juncture. I agree with you that it should have been Volkanovski. He's the number 1 contender. I'm
assuming that, Frankie has a long history with the UFC. Maybe they felt they owed this to Frankie because the fight had fallen off a couple times before, and maybe because, he did do them a favor with the Ortega fight, arguably. Even though it's his job. And
well, it's his job to fight who he's signed to fight.
Look,
and
the title fight was the Ortega fight was supposed to be a title fight with Holloway, remember?
Yeah. And again, he was not, again, once that fight falls out, a fighter's no longer contractually obligated to fight. You have to rework it with the fighter if you want to have them take a replacement fight. So Frankie didn't have to accept that fight. He chose to.
But, honestly, Volkanovski should not accept another fight other than Max Holloway at this point.
Absolutely not. I agree with you completely.
Look, Frankie did not fight for over a year. His last fight was April 2018. It
was what, the Cub Swanson rematch?
Yeah, right. And he sat out for over a year, and he got an opportunity to fight Holloway for the title. Now it's time for Volkanovski. He's the number 1 contender. This is his turn right now. So, and if his manager can't support him to make sure he can't do anything until he fights for the title, that's on them. And he has bad management. But it's the title fight or bust at this point.
There's literally nothing up. There's no other fight that makes sense for him in the division. He's coming off the win over Aldo. There's no one else.
Or Holloway for that matter.
Unless Holloway wants to vacate and permanently move up to lightweight. No, if he wants to fight at featherweight again.
It's just that I think he could be a competitive lightweight, but I don't see him becoming champion at this point.
He'd need to really retool some stuff, and he could do it.
He would need more time, and he would need more time. But
yeah, he's not going to just bounce up immediately and fight guys like, I mean, he lost to Dustin. He's not going to, I don't think he'd beat Khabib. I think he asks very interesting questions of Khabib stylistically, but I don't think he wins right now.
And then coming up the division,
I don't think he'd beat Tony Ferguson either at the moment.
I think Zabit will be a future contender, but he's not quite ready yet.
The UFC is going to continue pushing Zabit to be a future contender, if nothing else.
I mean, they should. I think he needs at least 2 more, I would say, or 1 or 2 more. Depends on who they match him up with for his next couple fights. But
Yeah.
Zabit's. So we have Volkanovski and Zabit as, I think, future matchups for Max, and those are tough fights. But if he can pass those tests, you know, he could potentially surpass Aldo's reign.
In some respects, yes. I just don't think Max will stick around the division long enough to really get to, because this was his, 3rd title defense?
3rd title defense, right.
I'm not sure he's going to be around the division long enough to get, 4 or 5 more.
I'm fine. As long as he can safely make the weight cut, I'm fine with him staying at 45.
I agree, but he's also not even 30. He's 27.
Right.
And it wouldn't shock me if, again, 3 years, another couple of years, and he decides he just doesn't like the weight cut.
I mean, that's the weird thing. Because he's still so shockingly young, we might be seeing a ceiling for him at featherweight at some point. Because he is a big boy for featherweight. So we'll see. But his game, the way his game has evolved is truly something impressive.
If you look at his, because almost all of his fights have taken place in the UFC. He came into the UFC, 4-0.
4-0.
So of his 25 fights, 21 of them have been in the UFC.
Right. And he went into this fight coming off like he just fought last April. And he lost a tough 5-round fight.
Mm-hmm. That was not an easy fight.
Another 5-round fight against a former champion, a very successful, tough champion. Like, Frankie's old, but he's still very good at his age. So he had lost a lot of momentum after that Poirier fight. So good for Max.
Yeah,
I'm happy Max has had. I mean, all things considered, he's had a pretty great career so far.
Definitely. I mean, he's already.
Guys older than him have not had a career as good as this. It's crazy.
The majority of MMA fighters will not have careers as good as Max Holloway's.
And he's only 27.
He has, I think, 14 UFC wins, something like that.
Yeah. So it's just crazy. Like, do you think he can get even better?
That's an interesting question. Yeah, I don't know.
To me, it'll be the next.
There are things he can do. That might further refine his game. There's a few defensive things he could do that might help out. There's the big knock on him is his lack of punching power at the moment.
Who, Max?
Yeah.
To me, my big knock on him is he kind of doesn't mind getting hit a lot.
Yeah, and again, there's a few defensive things he could maybe shore up, stop relying on his chin.
I don't think he's quite as bad as Conor McGregor, but I think he kind of fights with his chin a little too much sometimes.
In certain exchanges, yes. In other it's weird because in some places it's very clear he's like, yeah, go ahead, hit me, I don't care.
Yeah.
In others, it's very much, last night, for example, he was very good about shoulder rolling when Frankie was throwing right hands.
Right.
That went completely ignored by so many people. But there's times when he's very defensively responsible. And then there's other times when he just kind of goes, no, right, I don't feel threatened in this position or what have you. And like, okay, now go ahead and hit me. I don't care.
Frankie Frankie doesn't seem like he wants to retire just yet. I'm not going to say he should move down to 30. I don't even know if that's a good weight cut for him or not.
I mean, based on his size, it's probably where he should have been. But
the thing is, he's still 37, and he's had a lot. He's a 37-year-old who's had a lot of 5-round fights and a lot of miles on that body.
I think if I were him, I might try it out once. Just like, okay, let me, give me give me a decent bantamweight. Right. Let me see how it feels. But he might just really not like that weight cut. I mean, his entire career has been around. He spent it assiduously not cutting weight.
I mean, people were calling for him to move down to featherweight when he was having his lightweight run, which made no sense at the time because he was doing well as a lightweight. He was doing well for himself, and it made no sense for him to cut down until the time he did because the UFC had featherweights at that point, and he would have had an opportunity to fight for the title right off the bat. But I think what Frankie at least has going for him, he was a successful champion. He was a contender in 2 different weight classes, which is very hard to do. Just getting a title shot in the UFC is a hard thing to do, and he was a consistent top contender in a lower weight class, which he was never able to secure the title, but just the fact that he has a title run in his career and that he was always a smaller guy, I think that says a lot about him, Just his toughness and his skill level. If he were to retire tomorrow, he would have had a pretty successful career. Not saying he should, but he has nothing to be ashamed of at this point.
No, not really. I wouldn't. Yeah, I don't think there's anything you should be ashamed of.
I think maybe now, this is just my opinion. I think he probably should think about maybe not retirement, but his exit strategy. Because, look, he's 37 now. He's not a young man anymore. He's had, let's see. So now he's lost how many? He's lost 3 title fights at featherweight, right?
2 undisputed, 1 interim.
Okay, so he's lost. So he could potentially work for another title shot, but the fights aren't going to get easier.
At 37, he really should have his eye on the exit.
The window is the window's closing for him. Now, all right, hypothetically, if he were to make a move down to 135, look who's ahead of him. Rafael Assunção, Aljamain Sterling, Marlon Moraes, Peter Yan, Pedro Munoz. Some of the, Frankie, I think, matches up decently with a couple of those names, and I think you would agree.
Yeah, I think he'd probably beat Assunção or Munoz. Munoz rather handily, actually.
If he cuts down to 135, is he getting to the point where I'm 37, I'm cutting more weight now? Is this a tough cut? Is it an easy cut? Is the weight cut, is it taking away any of my speed? Is it taking away my footwork? And he's 37. Can he put together a win streak, a realistic win streak that puts him in the title contention at 135 against someone like a Henry Cejudo?
Considering that the UFC is going to shoehorn Uriah Faber in there, yeah, he's got a pretty good shot.
Well, maybe. Maybe. It just doesn't seem. It doesn't seem realistic to me. But look, he at least can hang his hat on the fact that he was a UFC champion. He defended his title multiple times in the bloodiest, most crowded, shark-infested division in the sport, which really wasn't even his ideal weight class. So that counts for a lot. I would say he should retire, but it's not my call. Just because it's only going to get even harder from here on out.
Yeah, now, I agree with you that he at a minimum, he should have his exit strategy in place at this point because
my thought, Robert, it's not just the fact that he's been in all these 5-round wars in the cage. It's the damage he's taking in training outside the cage too, which we don't know about. And that has to be a significant that's a big part of the accumulation of the damage fighters take in their career, correct?
it's much more, in many cases, it's more significant than what they take actually fighting because
Right.
they do it so much more often.
Depending on how often they're training and what they're doing in the gym, that's what I'm also concerned about that. So that's just my thought on Frankie, but ultimately it's not my call. He doesn't seem like he's quite ready to retire just yet.
No, and he's also in a bit of a rough spot. I think Frankie's record in UFC title fights is something like, after this, I believe he's
Like
what? 3-5-1.
Not quite as bad as Holly Holmes.
No, but it's a stat I've started looking at since you brought that up for just multiple time title challengers, because I think it's irrelevant. And I mean, look, I do it.
Not as bad as Holly Holm, Uriah Faber.
No, but it's not good.
No.
I mean, the only guys he's beaten in title fights were BJ Penn, who started his pretty epic decline right after those fights, and Gray Maynard, who also went on a pretty heavy slump.
Right.
And I'm not trying to downplay Frankie's accomplishments. Dude was a champion in a very, very competitive division that was not his ideal weight class. And
he was a top contender in a very tough competitive division as well, in featherweight.
Yeah, I agree there.
Look, beat Faber, Swanson was no joke when they fought.
No, Swanson was on the best run of his career when they fought the first time.
Mendes was at the top of his game too at that time. And even Jeremy Stevens for that. I mean, Jeremy Stevens has sort of
hung around that same spot that he had when he and Frankie fought that time, but
Stevens is always a tough customer. So.
And Stevens, in predictable Jeremy Stevens fashion, badly hurt Frankie in the first round, but Frankie just gutted through it.
All right, I think we can move on to the co-main event.
Yeah, I think.
What's your takeaway from Felicia Spencer versus Cyborg?
Felicia Spencer is a lot tougher than I thought she was.
Mm-hmm.
She took a lot of punches and a lot of shots to the body, and only really got hurt the one time. I think it was in the second round.
She had her moments. I was surprised with what she was able to do, but I also felt like she could have done more.
In some respects, yes. There's a few other things she might have been able to try doing, but the majority of her game revolves around either just kind of, Taekwondo style kicks at distance or being a superior grappler.
Like in the second round, like she had Cyborg hurt and on her heels a little bit, and I don't really feel she capitalized on that. And then Cyborg, by the third round, it looked like Cyborg had found her second wind.
Yeah, there's a few things there.
Okay.
Well, again, there's a couple things. One, Felicia Spencer got hurt pretty badly to the body in that second round. So I think even when she was able to because she caught Cyborg with a couple of elbows coming in, she was very well schooled and well disciplined in what she was what she really kind of wanted to do when Cyborg was doing what Cyborg does. So she had a really kind of a decent feel for landing intercepting elbows, for being able to push into the clinch and kind of neutralize some of Cyborg's game by constantly doing that. But I don't think I think the only time she kind of had Cyborg on her heels was after she had already been hurt to the body that same round. And I think she was just kind of like, okay, I get to take a break at this particular moment rather than continue getting abused. But I think she acquitted herself very well, all things considered. I mean, again, she didn't win, but she had moments of some success, and she didn't just crumple like a folded up piece of newspaper every time Cyborg touched her. And apparently that's the first time Cyborg's ever been cut in a fight. So, you know what? Again, there were some things that she was able to do successfully. And I think if the UFC is going to kind of keep featherweight around as something of a, even if not a real fully functional division, if something that you just kind of keep around to have a few fighters from time to time, I think she's certainly a valuable addition to that particular, roster. Because I don't think she can make 135. I think she'd have to lose a fair bit of muscle mass to do it. I could be mistaken about that, though, in all fairness. But Cyborg now, I think this was the last fight on her deal. So she said she's ready and willing to fight Amanda Nunes again, and, Godspeed to her.
Pretty much at the post-fight press conference, seemed to be a bad state between her and the UFC. I don't know if they can work something out, but looks like she's ready to go to WWE to fight Ronda Rousey at WrestleMania or something.
Ronda would never step in the ring with her, ever.
I mean, I'm sure Vince.
I'm just saying, Ronda. There's no way Ronda doesn't see her even in that context and get shell shocked. Like, nope.
I mean,
nopes.
But you have to agree, if WWE could make that happen, that would be huge. Like, that would be, like, they could get one of their biggest WrestleMania things ever, if they were to do that.
It might be pretty big if they could get, if they can get all parties to, get into a working relationship.
Because that's like that was, other than Lesnar versus Fedor, that was like one of the few dream matches they couldn't put together.
That's true. I think it's probably a little bit more likely she winds up in Bellator than she winds up in WWE right now, but I could be mistaken.
I mean, if she wants to go to Bellator, all the power to her.
I mean, she and Scott Coker have a previous relationship, and she'd be doing for Scott basically what she's been doing for Dana, but she likes Scott more. Because, I mean, in all seriousness, outside of Amanda Nunes, there's not really anyone in the UFC who's all that likely to have a lot of success against her. I mean, if they do the Nunes rematch, I mean, I'd bet the house on Amanda Nunes this time around, but I don't really see it going any differently. But if she wants that rematch, then you know what? Hey, more power to her for trying it. And it was a relatively successful fight financially. So if they can, come to financial terms for all parties and everything, then I'm okay with it. I mean, Nunes said she wants to defend the featherweight title next, and there's not really anyone other than Cyborg. So we'll have to see how that plays out. But, not a bad fight, all things considered there. With the way the rest of this card is, you want to just do quick hits for the rest of the fights? Because I don't have a whole lot for any of the rest of these, unless you do.
Nope.
All right. Jeff Neal defeated Nico Price via TKO in the second round. I think this was your fight of the night. No, it wasn't. Good. Shouldn't have been. But I know how much the UFC hates flyweight, so I thought they'd just completely ignore the flyweight fight on this card that happened. But this was a fun little kind of Roadhouse-style brawl. Jeff Neal's a legitimate guy to pay attention to. He should be fighting someone somewhere. He should probably be fighting somebody around the top 15 next. Not super high into the rankings, but, 14, 15, 16, 17, somewhere in that range. That seems like where he should be shooting next, because he's pretty legit. Arman Sarukian defeated Olivier Aubin-Mercier via unanimous decision, 29-28 across the boards. Meh. Look, Sarukian is a talented wrestler, and when I say wrestler, I don't just mean takedown artist. I mean the dude wrestles. But there was a lot of I can't remember the last enjoyable Aubin-Mercier fight. I can't. I know he's had a bunch of fights in the UFC. He's had a couple of finishes. He's been finished, I think, once or twice. But nothing he does really sticks out in my mind. He might be going the way of good old Elias Theodorou in the next 8 months or so. Just throwing it out there, especially at lightweight, where, lightweight, they're not hurting for talent. Krzysztof Jotko defeated Marc-Andre Barriault via split decision. This fight sucked. Viviane Araújo defeated Alexis Davis via unanimous decision, 29-28 across the boards. I like elements of Araújo's game, but man, does she have to learn to manage her energy. She came out bouncing, and just after about 3 minutes was like, okay, I cannot maintain this pace. Alexis Davis does not wear damage well. She gets marked up very, very easily. She had some moments of success she won the second round. But, Araújo's, I think, someone we should be paying a little bit of attention to, especially because she's young. And if she can kind of iron out some of those kinks in her game, definitely someone to pay attention to. Hakeem Dawodu got the predictable squash win over the debutante Yoshinori Hordier. Hordier? I think it was Hordier. Via head kick in the third round. Dawodu's got a little bit of the old Quentin Rampage Jackson in him of, stand still and let me hit you. But when Hordier slowed down, because Hordier gave him a lot of problems in the first round just by moving and hitting him and not letting him really fight. Then in the second, Hordier started slowing down. Dawodu actually cut off the cage a couple of times, was able to get his body work starting to go, and then in the third, he was able to find clinches, knees to the body, really nice head kick to finish it. But the UFC has gone out of their way to give him favorable matches so far. Might be time to take the kid gloves off at this point. Gavin Tucker defeated Seung-Woo Choi via rear naked choke in the third round. This was Tucker's first fight back in over a year, probably about 18 months, actually. A lot closer to 2 years now that I think about it. He was last seen in that fight with Rick Glenn that really should have been stopped. But, he looked all right. Coming off of that layoff, I'll give him a little bit of the benefit of the doubt on, just having a bit of ring rust. Choi didn't look terrible, actually. He acquitted himself rather well in a few different spots. So, he was brought in, again, more or less to lose, but had some moments of success. So, I don't know. I'll need another look at him before I can really kind of... Because he had fought... This was his second UFC fight, I believe, and he lost the other one. I can't remember who to, though. All right, in your fight of the night, Deiveson Figueiredo defeated Alexandre Pantoja via unanimous decision, 30-27 across the boards. This was a fight. I'm going to miss flyweights when they're gone, man. Figueiredo's a banger. He was able to hurt Pantoja several times. They had a couple of really nice scramble exchanges on the ground. They went full roadhouse at a few different points. What more could you ask for? Really, really good fight. Figueiredo would now be in the contendership queue if there was actually a champion in the division. Look, when I know Dana White said Henry's absolutely going to defend the flyweight title next, Dana's full of shit.
Well, if you heard Dana after Cejudo got hurt, he didn't quite go back on that, but he was already sort of
he walked it back.
Adjusting his previous assertions, so we'll see.
The previous plans were built around a different timetable that's no longer in place, so we'll have to see what happens next.
That's still after they cut half the division. So. More than
half. Look, this point in 2018, so July of 18, there had been, I think, 20 some odd flyweight fights in the UFC. Right around 20. Don't hold me to the exact number. I saw this on Twitter and I can't remember. But double digits, certainly, flyweight fights had taken place under the UFC banner at this point in time last year. To date, including Figueiredo versus Pantoja, we have had 8 in 2019. There are not even 15 fighters on the roster. at flyweight. And two of the top 3 flyweights in the world do not fight for the UFC. They have no interest in this division. But this was a great fight. Jillian Robertson defeated Sarah Frota via TKO, elbows in the second round. Sarah Frota's not good and shouldn't be in the UFC. Not to say she can't get better, with time and experience, but she's not a UFC caliber fighter. And kicking everything off, Eric Koch fighting at welterweight. Remember when he was supposed to fight Jose Aldo at featherweight? Because I do. When he defeats Kyle Stewart via unanimous decision, boring fight. A lot of clinching. Both these guys gassed pretty hard in the second round and then just never recovered. Anyway, that was it. Again, a very, very meh card. Best things about this card, Figueiredo and Pantoja. Absolutely look that up if you haven't seen it. And if you're really interested in some of the minutia of fighting, there's a lot of interesting stuff in Holloway and Edgar. But other than that, not a whole lot here. All right, Jeff, what are your burning desires from that group of fights? Anything stick out to you?
This was a one-fight card.
Pretty much. I remember I was watching it live, and they had those first 2 fights on pay-per-view, so Jotko Barrio and then Saruki and Obama Mercier, and I went, yeah, but you just had to throw Figueiredo and Pantoja buried on the prelims, didn't you? The UFC hates that division. I'm almost certain.
Put Jeff Neal, Nico Price as the main event for ESPN.
On an ESPN Plus card, maybe.
No, I mean for the prelims.
Oh, for the prelims, yes. I see what you mean.
Figueiredo versus Pantoja probably should have been on the main card. Jotko Barrialt was awful.
That's going on my list of worst fights of 2019.
Mercier was awful. It was a listless card for the most part.
There were a few jokes after we had Tucker and Dawodu win back-to-back fights about how Canadian MMA is not dead. And then we had Jotko. Then we had the first 2 fights on the main card. Like, did it just die again? Canadian MMA has re-expired. Because, all right, well, such as it was, that was UFC 240. Thank you to everyone who followed along live, who read after the fact, who commented, who shared my work with anyone, who just clicked on it to give me a click and didn't even read anything. You know what? I don't care.
Think the card will be better than next week's?
I don't know. Next week's
ESPN card.
It is. UFC on ESPN 5. There's some potential on this card. There really is. There's also
potential
so
for horrendous.
I mean,
outcomes.
The main event is one of those that's. I tend to think of Colby Covington kind of as the welterweight Chael Sonnen, mostly in the fact that. I mean, again, part of it is just the bad trash talk.
He is not known for his barn burners. Like, he's not.
Yeah, I mean,
he's a grinder. He's a grinder. He's a grinding wrestler. That's his game.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember who I heard say this about Chael, and I think it was. I think this was part of a larger point that John Danaher was making. If you're going to be a fighter, you do have to define yourself at some point. Some people are action fighters. Some people are technically, perfectionists. He listed like 3 or 4 different, kind of ways that kind of fighters that you can be. Not in the sense that, not just in the who you are in the cage sense, but more in the what is your fighting persona? Who are we selling here? And he listed Chael Sonnen as a great example of a drama fighter, because Chael's didn't have barn burners. But Chael absolutely got you invested in the build up to the fight, kind of, even if the fight itself was a lot of humdrum. And Colby's kind of the same way. He goes out of his way to kind of get you going prior to the fight, and then the fight itself is a lot of his
Colby's
wrestling.
Smart. He knew he had to. He clearly took cues from the Chael Sonnen playbook, and it worked to his advantage.
Yeah, and you know what? God bless him, man. If he's able to get paid for it and it raises his profile, raises his bank account, go get paid, man.
Combat sports, they want clowns. They want characters. They want personalities. They want spectacle. They want, even if it's phony, they want guys who.
Oh, it's almost all phony.
Look. No one cared about Muhammad Ali when he was Cassius Clay and winning the Olympic gold medal.
Yeah, most people don't care about the Olympics and boxing anyway.
But look, what did he do? He modeled. He
was a loudmouth before he was a loudmouth before he changed his name.
But come on, look. He clearly modeled the persona off of a pro wrestler.
Yep. And
became a living legend. Okay, I'm not saying he wasn't skilled, but he played it up, and he developed an on-screen persona that drove people crazy. And Muhammad Ali at the time was a polarizing figure, undeniable.
He still is in some ways.
He had just as many people that hated him, that loved him. So.
Yeah, and Colby seems to have decided, all right, this is the route I'm going to go. And again, like, I don't care. I don't think he believes a lot of the stuff he says, certainly not to the degree that he says it. He's saying it for effect.
Right.
But
it works.
It does. Works. Much as it grates on me personally, and all of the stupid trash talk in MMA grates on me personally, it is effective. And you know what? You're in that sport, you're putting your health and your body at risk. You know what? Do what you have to do to get paid, man. I don't begrudge any fighter anything that they do within the bounds of legality.
Fighting Robbie Lawler, and this Lawler may not be the champion he was, but he's still probably one of the more dangerous fights in the division because he has that ability to come forward and just end your night in seconds. He almost did it to Ben Askren.
Oh, God, that slam he hit Askren with was a thing of beauty.
Right. So Covington has to be careful here because this is not the Lawler who returned to the UFC and went on a warpath to become champion, but he's still a very dangerous Robbie Lawler. And I think you would agree.
Oh, I agree. Robbie Lawler's always dangerous. And Covington also presents a lot of the same problems that Robbie has demonstrated an ability to deal with. Most of Robbie's career has been shutting down takedown artists and then punishing them on the feet. That's kind of his bag. Now, Covington is is more on the unique side in a couple of ways, and one of them is just his relentless pressure. Colby doesn't really take a backward step, and Robbie can be pressured. That's largely where RDA beat him. It's where Donald Cerrone had some success against him. It's where Condit had success against him when he did.
He's a cardio machine. Doesn't really get tired.
True. And if he gets you on the fence, even if you're stopping his takedowns, part of the problem that a lot of people have had against Covington, it's not that he's a monster at getting takedowns, or once he gets on top of you, you are never getting up, because that's not the case. But once he makes contact with you, getting away from him is so difficult. He just does not let you get space. So even if you're not being taken down, I mean, he did not get Dos Anjos down effectively in their fight, but I think like 3 times. Like he was able to get a lot more mat returns than straight up takedowns. But Dos Anjos could not get free, and that's what caused him significantly more problems than the than any sort of general top pressure or monstrous takedowns out in space that Covington hit him with. And Robbie can be backed into the fence, and as good as Robbie's takedown defense is generally, some of what Covington does is just he goes up and down very, very well. He goes from attacking your legs to the body to duck behinds, again, to looking for mat returns, and he just doesn't give you space to really do anything. So while you're not taking damage, you're losing the fight. And that's something I'm not sure I've really seen Robbie deal with, especially lately. I mean, the closest we have, I think, for comparison would be some of the Johnny Hendricks fights. And Johnny Hendricks, while a more credentialed amateur wrestler, had a very different style of MMA wrestling, and he did a lot of getting you to the fence and then spending a lot more time kind of, bent over looking for something rather than, again, a lot of the up and down, a lot of the angle changes, a lot of the go-behinds that Covington is much more, uses much more liberally. So I'm not sure, really. I can see either man winning this fight. Colby got outstruck by Damian Maia.
I'm picking Covington, but only by the slightest of margins.
I'm kind of with you there. I'm leaning towards him just a little bit. I mean, again, Colby got outstruck for a round by Damian Maia. And if you get outstruck for a round by Robbie Lawler, you're probably going to sleep. But yeah, I feel confident leaning towards Colby.
Lawler does have his problems, though.
Yeah, neither of these guys are perfect.
Sometimes Lawler can be slow to start, and sometimes I think he gets a little too laid back in his game plan, and he waits too long to pull that trigger. Once he pulls the trigger, he's like a killing machine. But sometimes it takes a little for him to get it started, and in doing so, he's suddenly dropped 2 rounds.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm not necessarily. I'm just saying we've seen Lawler do that in multiple fights, and
the kind of fight that Colby brings to you is the kind that encourages you to kind of get lazy mentally too. We're here on the fence again, and you're bent over again, and I can't get anywhere again, and oh God, I'd rather be doing anything else but this right now, not because you're hurting me, but because I'm so bored.
I mean, look, Dos Anjos really kept him on his heels that entire fight.
Yeah.
That was one of the tougher fights of his career. And
that was a brutal
fight. Lawler's 37 now. He's had over 40 fights in his career at this point. And
some of those have been wars, man.
Look, he did basically get finished by Ben Askren in his last fight out. He's had a lot of wars. He's fought in many different weight classes, and I don't know. We'll see. I'm only slightly leaning toward Covington because Covington is not without his flaws, and he's mainly a wrestler and a grinder, so we know what he wants to do. And like you said, if he can get outstruck by Damian Maia, Lawler is also capable of that, but can he do it? So.
He also really didn't want to grapple with Maia the same way he's going to try and grapple with Lawler, but it just speaks to a general deficiency in his game at the moment. Yeah, I'm very, very confident in leaning just slightly towards Colby Covington, if that makes any sense. All right, your co-main event is currently announced. I'm shocked this fight hadn't happened before, but Jim Miller and Clay Guida are going to fight. And you know what? For an old man fight, you could do worse.
Kind of makes sense considering where both men are at this point in their careers. I mean, it should be an easy win for Miller, but Miller's slowed down a lot too in the last several years.
Miller's been out-wrestled a lot lately.
Miller only recently snapped a 4-fight losing streak, and he's only 2-1 in his last 3.
Yeah, he attributes, well, 2 things about that. One of those is his level of opposition. I mean, look at those losses.
I mean, Trinaldo's not a world beater. Trinaldo's good, but he's not a world beater.
No, but, Anthony Pettis, Dustin Poirier, Dan Hooker, and Charles Oliveira are
Dan
the
Hooker,
others.
Dan Hooker is decent, but he's not like top 5 to me.
No, but he is, I think, top 15 now.
Oliveira.
I mean, look, it's Charles Oliveira is just he's not a perfect fighter. He's not this winning machine, but he's also a tough guy to beat in a lot of respects.
I mean, look, he lost to Pettis. Does Pettis losing to Pettis in 2017 mean a whole lot?
Yeah, there are worse guys to lose to than Pettis.
I guess, but I'm picking Miller.
Yeah, I'm gonna lean towards Miller as well, but I won't be shocked if he gets Guida humped for 15 minutes.
It is. Look, I know you're not a big Guida fan, but he has had earlier in his career, he did have his entertaining fights and entertaining moments, even though he did let's be honest, he did do a lot of silly stuff in the cage as well.
Still does.
Yeah.
He was throwing scorpion kicks at Eric Koch. It's just, again...
I remember that fight with Gomi where he was, like, dancing around.
Or the fight with Gray Maynard where he spent 4 rounds doing nothing.
And then as I recall in that fight, Gomi was just standing in front of him looking stunned.
Yeah, Gomi actually at some point just stood still and went, okay, what are you doing? And Guido went, nah, man, can't you hear the music?
It worked. He submitted him. And then he submitted him in the second round.
Gomi at that point.
Oh, man.
Gomi was so far past it at that point.
Gomi's another guy who just sort of like, what happened to you, Gomi?
Just time. I think, Gomi, time and a notorious kind of disinterest in training.
Even in his Pride career, Gomi had like just embarrassing hiccups, like the loss to Aurelio.
That was a little bit weird.
Like had a great performance in the tournament, won the title, and then gets submitted by Aurelio, and just gets dominated and submitted by Aurelio in the first round. Looked like he didn't care at all.
Yeah, I think one of the things that was he was pretty notorious for was his lackadaisical training methods. So,
picking Miller.
It's
Miller,
more sentimental, but
yeah. If you're gonna keep fighting Miller, at least beat Clay Guida. Come on here,
please. It's more sentimental at this point, but yeah, I'm picking Miller as well.
Okay.
All right, also at lightweight, Joaquim Silva.
Not the biggest names, but it's a decent lightweight contest.
Well, Silva's not bad. I mean, he knocked out Jared Gordon in his last fight. That was a pretty good fight, actually, as I recall.
Yep.
His only loss is to Vince Pichel, and Nasrat Haqparast is pretty legit.
Yeah, I agree. Let's see. I'm picking Silva.
I'm gonna pick Haqparast, actually. I think Jared Gordon had enough success in places against Silva that he provided again a bit of a blueprint for what Haqparast can do successfully. So I'm gonna go with Haqparast, but that fight's gonna fly under some radars, but it's pretty good.
You can see why the UFC was so desperate to get Colby Covington on this card.
Yeah, this card really did need a fight like Covington and Lawler.
It's really thin for an ESPN card.
It is. Middleweight, Trevin Giles will fight Gerald Meerschaert. Gerald Meerschaert. I want to go with Meerschaert. I mean, he's had a really rough UFC career. It's been very, very up and down. But I seem to recall scoring his last fight for him, the Kevin Holland fight. I might be misremembering that.
I have nothing else to add there.
Scott Holtzman will fight Dong Yun Ma. This is actually a pretty good fight.
This is a good matchup. I like this matchup.
Yeah, Dong Yun Ma, for those unfamiliar, is actually Dong Yun Kim, but not Stun Gun Dong Yun Kim, the Maestro Dong Yun Kim. He goes by Ma to distinguish himself from Kim at this point. And
has a winning record at least.
Well, the Maestro's had a lot of really engaging fights. I mean, he came in that fight with Dominique Steele. He was up at welterweight and still had moments before getting finished. His fight with Marco Polo Reyes from UFC 199 is absolutely insane. That is an insane brawl.
I'm picking Holtzman.
Yeah, that's the smart pick. Scott Holtzman is a tough, kind of grindy wrestler. He's coming off of the loss to Nick Lentz, but other than that, his only losses are to Drew Dober and Josh Emmett. He's a tough guy to really kind of get out of there, and I think he will win.
Solid mid-level lightweight.
Yeah. And then, for some reason, Darko Stojic and Kennedy Nzechukwu.
Cab driver fight of the evening.
I vaguely recall Nchekwu's UFC debut against Paul Craig. I have tried very hard to block it from my mind because it was so bad.
Holdover from the Contender Series. He's fighting Darko Stojic.
I'm actually going to pick Stojic because Nzechukwu was so bad. I got done with that fight with Paul Craig and went, okay, I never want to see this guy fight ever again. And yet, here he is.
Yeah,
this
fight on the main card.
I don't know.
Puzzling. Mickey Gall got relegated to the prelims. Is Mickey Gall fighting for his UFC job here, you think?
Mickey Gall should not have a UFC job. He will be fighting Salim Touhari, and look, Mickey Gall's a gimmick fighter. His whole gimmick was, I'm going to call out these, other kind of gimmicky fighters who no one really wants to see fight, but are hanging around.
At first. Worked out well for him for a while.
It did, and he got to beat up some high-profile, stupid gimmick fighters.
He got finished by Diego Sanchez.
Then he got finished with strikes by Diego Sanchez in 2019, and he should have been done in the UFC at that time.
He's 5-2 though, and he's fighting a guy who's 10-3, who is winless in the UFC so far. Salim, I'm sorry if I mispronounced this. He's Touhari.
He's Polish. I forget exactly. I believe it's Touhari.
Lost to Warley Alves and Kaden Nakamura in his only 2 UFC fights. So.
Yeah, I think they're giving Mickey Gall a bit of all right, you better win this or go home kind of thing.
I'm picking Salim.
I want to, but I'm actually going to pick Gall, and I'm just prepared to eat crap when he makes me look stupid. Okay, for the record, I'm not sure if we have the correct bout order here, but we're just going to go with it. So I apologize to some of these I know are in order, some of them I do not.
Shevchenko's little sister.
Big sister.
Really?
I believe Antonina's older.
Oh, she's 34. So how old is Valentina?
Valentina is 31. Yeah, Antonina's older.
Oh, wow.
Valentina is just a lot better.
Well, little physically then.
Yeah, Antonina very different physically.
Never mind.
Well, Antonina's taller, but she's not nearly as thick. Valentina's a very, very well-muscled woman, whereas Antonina's a bit more on the a lot more on the lean muscle side.
Antonina is in the UFC because of her sister. You think?
More or less. Well, let me put it like this: she got a shot to be in the UFC because she's Valentina's sister. They're also trying really hard to develop women's flyweight, and Antonina is a body for that division.
Right.
And she's fighting Lucy Pudilova, who is not really all that good. I think Antonina wins here.
Okay. Flyweight Jordan Espinoza versus Matt Schnell.
They're probably going to cut both of these guys after the fight. I like Matt Schnell, so it kind of sucks as far as that goes.
2 women's flyweight fights: Lauren Murphy versus Mara Romero Barella, and Miranda Granger versus Hannah Goldie.
I feel okay picking Lauren Murphy in that fight. Barella's a good grappler, but is kind of limited as far as that's all she's got going for her.
Right.
I hate picking against her, though, because she runs a drug ring out of Italy, and I don't know if she'll have me whacked. And as far as the other one, I don't know anything about either of those 2 women.
I wonder if we'll see any footage of that on Embedded.
What, her drug ring?
Yeah.
Probably not.
Now I'm gonna be up all night doing research on this.
She was arrested by Italian authorities. Yeah, she was for distributing and selling prohibited drugs, including cocaine. I forget how much it was. She was just part of a ring. There were like there were 33 other people, and she actually can't. She is not allowed to compete in Italy at all. She's been suspended by, I believe, their national anti-doping agency for 15 years.
Everyone deserves a second chance, Robert.
Look, I'm not saying she's a terrible person.
Except Michael Vick, who is a terrible person.
95% of all professional athletes are terrible people.
I mean, but did you see the tapes of Jon Jones? Dana White saw the tapes.
No. Oh, one other bout for that card. We have Claudio Silva and Cole Williams. That's been announced. Cole Williams, I believe, making his UFC debut here. He's got to be replacing someone. Yeah, Claudio Silva was supposed to fight Ramazan Emeev. That sucks. That would have been a really good fight. Claudio Silva is actually a pretty good fighter. I mean, there was some dubiousness about the finish of Danny Roberts, but other than that, he's undefeated. His only loss was his debut professionally, where he was disqualified for an elbow for using an illegal elbow strike of some variety. And he's 5-0 in the UFC. Unfortunately, his big thing has been inactivity because he debuted in the UFC in 2014 and just missed from 2014 to 2018. Just no fights. So I feel pretty confident picking him there. Claudio Silva is, again, a pretty solid fighter. But that's gonna be UFC on ESPN 5 again. Early start time next Saturday or this coming Saturday. So be on the lookout for that again. The first prelim, I believe, is noon Eastern. So adjust it for time accordingly. And hey, it'll be nice to have a Saturday evening to myself for once. I don't know what I'll do with it.
All right, so let's
probably waste it.
To news items. BJ.
Let's start with BJ Penn because
they announced Penn fighting at UFC 244. The grudge match finally climaxes between BJ Penn and Nick Lentz, and Nick Lentz would read his slam poetry on the MMA Hour with Ariel Helwani when it was still hosted by Ariel Helwani, and now they're finally going to fight. Robert, the grudge match we've been waiting several years for is going to happen.
There's a grudge associated with this fight?
There is. It goes back years.
If you say so.
It goes back when BJ Penn fought Frankie for the third time, as I recall. So quite some time. BJ Penn is only 40 years old and has gone 0-7-1 in his last 8 fights. So
he's on a 7-fight losing streak.
He has not won a fight since beating Matt Hughes in November 2010, so this comeback is just around the corner. You can feel it. Dana White said last night at the post-fight press conference that BJ Penn talked him into it, and he's booking the fight. But win, lose, or draw, there will be no more fights for BJ Penn after this fight in the UFC. So at least we can count on 6 more fights with BJ Penn in the UFC.
You beat me to the joke. I appreciate it. This doesn't I'm beyond saying this doesn't make sense. All right, it doesn't make sense. We all know this doesn't make sense.
How is New York even sanctioning this?
I don't know that they have yet. Which is one of I know the UFC said this is what they want. New York, I give you a lot of grief for a good reason.
Oh yeah, the fight isn't official yet technically, so there's technically still time.
You know,
do not New York this one up.
You are looking at a man, again, in BJ Penn, who's not even been competitive, really.
Who probably has CTE.
Almost certainly, given... I would be shocked if he doesn't. Let me put it like that. I'm not a doctor.
Well, I'm not a doctor either. And, Dana White had that whole thing. If, any of you have a problem with this, or you doctors, I don't know. He said something like that when people were questioning this move last night. Unless you're a doctor or something, shut up, basically, was the gist of it. And
he will then, of course, ignore any doctor he doesn't like.
But the evidence we do know, and you hear about these erratic public incidents with BJ Penn. You're aware of them, yes?
Yep.
It's hard for me. I mean, these are these not incidents that are associated with someone suffering from post-concussion syndrome? Don't they get erratic and they have violent, aggressive behavior?
Yeah, a lot of them do.
And depression.
Yep, those are things that have generally been linked to CTE based on my knowledge.
So I'm not saying he does have CTE, but what I am saying is it wouldn't surprise me if he does.
Wouldn't shock me. Again, given the way he's fought and the amount of blows he's taken to the head, I'd be surprised if he doesn't. I'm surprised by any fighters that get out of fighting and do not suffer long-term brain damage.
I mean, they still could.
It is the norm.
We just aren't aware of it.
Yeah, it is the norm for that to happen. It is rather. But I mean, Nick Lentz is still a good fighter.
I can't fathom or approve of this. I mean, Bisping fighting 3 weeks, fighting Gastelum how long was that? Was it 3 weeks after the GSP fight?
Something like that. It was short.
It was
real short.
In China, I thought was ridiculous.
Well, the UFC got to self-regulate, so
I don't think that should have been allowed. Because Bisping got horribly knocked out in that fight. And I think he didn't get knocked out against GSP, but he clearly got his bell rung in that fight.
Oh, yeah. George dropped him with that left hook and then bludgeoned him with elbows. There was a lot of concussive force applied to his head in that fight.
It made no sense at all.
Yeah. I look at this fight and I go, here's kind of where my brain goes with this. If the regulatory bodies in place are not going to actually serve the intended function of a large part of which is, protecting fighters from themselves, for being for want of a better expression, being the grown-ups in the room to look at a situation like this dispassionately and go, no, we can no longer condone or sanction this, then you do not actually serve a purpose. At which point we should just, ignore at which point, again, if you're not actually going to fulfill the function that you were created to do, why do you exist in the first place, and why should we care at all?
I have a question here. You and I are not doctors, and we're not regulators. I admit that.
But being a regulator is a elected or appointed position.
Are the collective regulators in these combat sport and regulatory bodies for athletics, are they doctors that have medical degrees or have researched CTE?
I don't know. It depends. I think it depends on the commission. Some of them might have actual doctors on them.
But do you think Bob Bennett does?
Oh, Bob Bennett? He's not a doctor.
What is it? Why do we have to be? My question is, why do we have to be doctors with medical degrees or advanced degrees in post-concussion syndrome or CTE or whatever to be able to say this is a bad idea?
I don't know why people think that's the case.
At all.
That doesn't make sense to me. Look, I think it's a bad idea. And
I'm not being an idiot here, right? Am I making a good point here?
No, I get your point. I mean, look, when BJ and Clay Guida fought, I took a bit of crap for saying that BJ Penn should not be allowed to fight anymore at all.
Why would anyone give you crap for that?
Because who am I to say what he should be doing with his life? And he looked pretty, and he had a decent 5 minutes, and whatever rationalization people want to throw at it. Look, I'm going to make this, I'll say this again.
I feel like we were at this point after the third fight with Edgar, where he came back and looked horrendous.
I mean, I agree. I also thought we were at this point after the Yair Rodriguez fight. I also thought we were at this point after the Dennis Seaver fight. But for some reason, we keep coming back to the same point. And look, I do not think BJ Penn should be fighting. I mean, here's the other thing about this, but if the argument is, well, he looked okay for 5 minutes against Clay Guida, I'm sorry, does winning reverse brain damage? Because I don't think it does. At what point did that become a thing?
I just remember when he was doing this again a few fights ago, and Ariel Helwani's he's doing it the right way now. He's training with an actual camp, and they're gonna help him train and do it the right way. Come on here.
Okay, look, A, you should have done that earlier. B, at this point, it doesn't matter. Your ticket's punched, dude. You're done.
Had he done that after the John Fitch fight, I would have been like, all right, let's give him a shot. But
I agree.
We've seen too many incidents.
At this point, I do not think there's anything he can do from a preparatory standpoint to actually fix the problems. I just don't think it exists.
I mean,
I don't think he should be fighting anymore at all. I do not think it's healthy.
I don't think he should be licensed, quite frankly.
Yeah, I think we have passed the point of, and whatever the line is, again, it's a weird thing, but I think we have passed the point where he should, in good conscience, be allowed to fight be allowed to fight anywhere at all. That's just where I've landed on this. And look, anyone else out there that, I'm not going to say if you feel differently, you're wrong. If your line for this is different than mine, fair play. But don't.
I don't think he had a good 5 minutes against Guida.
I mean, relatively good. I think he won a round.
I didn't give him a round. And second of all, it was Clay Guida.
Yeah, I know. Congratulations. You did not look terrible for 5 minutes against 2019 Clay Guida. No.
Right. How much of is that even much of an accomplishment?
It's not. At this point, I'm pretty convinced BJ Penn just actually wants to die in the cage. Like that is his life goal right now, is to find some way out under those circumstances.
And I guess Dana White just doesn't like him as much as he does Chuck Liddell.
That is pretty well documented at this. Look, Dana White said very specifically that he was not going to promote Chuck Liddell, not because Chuck Liddell wouldn't draw, but because, quote unquote, I don't want that money. Okay. Yeah, you're full.
I agree with that sentiment. So I don't know how he can do, and turn around and do that with BJ Penn this many times.
I mean, look, when he criticized Oscar De La Hoya for putting on Chuck and Tito, whatever, I just went, buddy, you're booking BJ Penn. Shut up. You have no moral high ground. You continue to book BJ Penn. You don't get to mock anybody else.
After all that and booking BJ Penn again against Nick Lentz.
I mean, Nick Lentz is going to run over him like a steamroller. Like, that's not a competitive fight. That's not even close to competitive. Nick Lentz is still a good, not top 15, but relevant lightweight. And he's probably going to do some serious damage to BJ Penn. And everyone's going to feel gross.
Put their foot down and do their job.
Yeah, your job is not to just sanction whatever comes across your desk. Your job is to evaluate it. This is not a fight that should be allowed. BJ Penn should not be allowed to fight, period. I think we've just reached that point.
I have no problem saying it.
So
I was iffy on it when he came back. I was iffy on it when he came back for a third fight with Edgar at featherweight, which was nonsense to me, but whatever. And then he, I think, fought at featherweight again after that.
He fought a couple of times at featherweight. Both the Rodriguez and the Seaver fights were at featherweight. I mean, it was only I think for the Guida fight that he moved back up to lightweight.
Well,
double check that actually. Hang on.
God, it's sad. It's very sad.
Okay, he moved back up to lightweight to fight Ryan Hall when he got heel hooked.
Ugh.
And then he stayed there when he fought Clay Guida.
Okay, so the Jon Jones business. Dana White said something at the press conference last night. Some of the videos are coming back. I've seen some videos. I don't want to talk about it because I don't want to hurt his case or whatever, but it's unfortunate. Let's put it that way. told TSN in Canada, when you're famous, these type of things happen to you. From what I've seen so far, when it all surfaces and comes to the top, it looks good for Jon. It looks very good for Jon. It's quite sad, actually. Make of that what you will.
Here's my take on this, and this is a life lesson for anyone out there who cares to listen. All right, I'm not just going to point this at Jon, but this is for everybody. Different people are capable of doing and handling themselves in different situations. Some people, maybe this is you, cannot be around, just cannot contain themselves when they're, when they go engage in activities. Look, some people can go out to a bar, have a good time, and nothing bad happens. Some people can't do it.
Some can sing karaoke and be nice, be a happy drunk, and not.
Some people can go out and just have a couple of drinks and not get hammered.
And then realize they're too hammered to drive home themselves and call a cab.
There are some people who can, go to sporting events and just, not be giant jackasses. There's a lot of people who can't. And if you are not one of those people, look, again, some people can stay up until 3:30 in the morning and then wake up 2 hours later and go to work and be fine. Some people can't. Know what you can and cannot handle as a person. Just as an individual. And if you're Jon Jones, I think at this point you probably just shouldn't be in a strip club. Jon's not whatever Jon's issues are and have been, he's not a guy who seems to have engaged in, violence towards other people outside the cage. That does not seem to be his issue. Could be wrong. I don't have complete information, but that's not something about him that has come to light thus far. But between you being famous, between you having some of the issues that you have, is it really a good idea for you to do this? And if that just means, you don't get to, go drinking with your buddies at a strip club anymore, hey, you know what? Make the tough call. And just avoid putting yourself in this kind of a position. Even if assuming that he did nothing wrong, then you're better off to avoid that whole situation to begin with, just because you never go to a strip club. This is never going to happen. And if Robert, he is in the wrong.
Robert?
Yeah.
It ain't no sin to go into a strip club. He was just being rebellion.
Actually, I'm of the opinion it is a sin to go into a strip club, but my religious beliefs notwithstanding.
I mean,
I'm not here to preach. It is not illegal.
What if you're going into the strip club to preach to sinners? Then God would probably accept it, right?
I don't know. Look, there's plenty of other sinners. You don't have to go.
Well, you ruined the joke. I was trying to quote Pac-Man Jones there, and you.
Oh, I was not aware that. Look, I was not aware that was a Pac-Man Jones quote.
Because he was another professional athlete who got in trouble after going into a strip club.
Yeah, guy.
Handle himself.
Look, I get it. We all like looking at women or men or whatever. Those establishments exist for a reason. But let's do a little risk assessment here. And again,
we're talking about Jon Jones.
Yeah, again, even if he did nothing wrong, you put yourself in a position to be exploited. And if he did do something wrong, you could have avoided the whole thing by not being there in the first place. People can handle different things.
He is the guy who failed a drug test. Now, this is documented. It's documented he failed a drug test for taking dick pills.
Yes.
That's the cover story, at least. Now, was he taking male enhancement pills for his fiance, who he's still not married to, as far as I know?
Those long engagements, man, they're killer.
Or do you think, come on here. He's going to all these parties. He's going to strip clubs. Come on now.
Look, I don't know. And
it's such a stretch that he has side pieces. Come on.
Almost certainly.
I'm not saying it with certainty, but it wouldn't surprise me. Second of all, why has he not gotten married yet?
Couldn't tell you. You'd have to ask them.
We publicly know the mother of his children is his fiance, and they've never gotten married, and they've been together for over 10 years at this point. What's wrong with this picture?
I don't know.
I don't know. To me, it just says he doesn't want to make it official, is what it sounds like to me. Because he's worried about alimony.
I couldn't tell you for sure, but that's certainly a reason. I don't know.
But does New York have common law marriage laws at all? Do you know?
I do not. I imagine they do. Most places do.
I mean, technically, I don't know what New York's law is on this, but
I don't even know if he lives in New York at the moment. I don't know where Jon lives.
He might live in Albuquerque. I don't know what New Mexico's laws on this are either, but I'm curious. I'm just saying it's a little weird to me. He never got married.
I agree with that. That is a little weird.
Look, not just as bait, like they aren't like. They made a big thing, a public thing of getting engaged, and it's a little strange to me. It just tells me he doesn't really want to get married, and he doesn't want to. He's worried about those financial commitments long term.
Again,
you're this God-fearing Christian. You're engaged to this woman. She's the mother of your children. Why would you not marry her when you're engaged? I don't know. I don't understand.
I don't get it either.
He's had plenty of time. He's had plenty of time to think about this. Don't you think that's a little weird, Robert? I mean, come on.
Look, man, I'm weird. From my reckoning, I'm weird for being 33 and never having been married. My culture is weird like that.
Okay. But have you been engaged to someone for like 15 years?
I've never had a serious relationship.
Okay, so there you go. I'm just like he's been with this woman since.
I mean, again, I can only give you in this respect. I can give you the LDS perspective.
What do you think?
Look, pretty much everyone I went to high school with is married now and has at least 2 kids. I think most of kind of the culture around here is you get engaged and you don't want to be engaged for very long. Right. I don't know what the average is around here. I'd have to poll people and figure it out, and it's too much effort, and I don't care enough to go through it.
If you're Jon Jones's wife / fiance, whatever it is at this point, to me, it's got to be more of a Kobe Bryant situation at this point, right? Come on.
I couldn't tell you for sure, but
I mean, how is she not embarrassed by these stories? Whether he's guilty or not, it's embarrassing for her. Don't you agree?
I would be surprised if it isn't. I'd be embarrassed.
I mean, whatever. I'm not a marriage counselor. It drives me nuts. Maybe it shouldn't, but it drives me nuts. And I'm sorry for that, but it does.
Different stuff different stuff gets under different people's skin. So we'll see what happens with Jon. Again, I don't know, but I'd be a little bit surprised. How do I say this? Again, Jon's not ever been documented to have the issues that's not been part of his pattern of behavior. Doesn't mean it hasn't happened, just means we don't know about it.
What, sexual assault?
Something like that, yeah.
Well,
in this instance, it's just battery, right? I think that's all he's been, kind of accused of is battery. From a legal perspective, I'd have to double check that, so don't quote me.
Don't quote me on that either.
Yeah, it's Jon Jones, man.
Let's see.
This is just the circus.
I'm just trying to find the latest Jon Jones thing in a long list.
Again, I think the most recent thing I saw was specifically battery was the only thing that was brought up. And batteries are, I don't want to say weird.
Battery.
I don't want to say weird because it's I don't want to say weird because it falls into a slightly different legal definition than assault, but the two are usually paired together. Because battery is.
Yeah.
I forget the I forget the separation between the two, but they are very closely linked. And when you commit one, you usually commit the other just in the course of going through. Anyway, I don't know. This might just be a case of, again, someone kind of trying to take advantage of his celebrity status. This might be him, doing stupid things. I don't know.
Could be. But
the saga of Jon Jones continues to be the saga of Jon Jones.
It doesn't seem like this is going to sideline him as badly as the hit and run. And Corey Anderson was getting into it with him at a signing event.
Corey Anderson is barely a relevant fighter.
Well, he's relevant now.
Does Corey Anderson even still exist?
Yeah, I mean, he was talking up Jon Jones and getting into it with him at his autograph signing.
Good for you trying to make that happen, I guess, but it ain't going to happen. You're not good enough. I'd really like to fight Jon. No one can remember your last 3 fights, buddy, and that includes me, and I watched all of them. Maybe
we should just do Shogun versus Jon again.
Don't. Don't even put that out there.
Anderson won his last 3 fights. He lost his defeat to Teixeira and Cummins. He hasn't fought this year yet, though.
Even Dana White buried Corey Anderson after he started making that noise. Said, Corey's turned down like 50 fights. Dana exaggerates, but when was Corey Anderson's last fight? Just for the sake
December against Latifi.
Okay, so you barely got by Ilir Latifi 8 months ago. And now all of a sudden, stop, Corey. Have a performance that people actually remember other than Ovince St. Preux head kicking you, and maybe we can talk. I have to look this up now because I have seen all of this man's fights. I know that because I have covered them. Okay, he's actually on a 3-fight winning streak. Wow. He beat Pat Cummins, Glover Teixeira, and Ilir Latifi. Prior to that, he was knocked out by Ovince St. Preux and Jimmy Manuwa. I could not remember any of those fights. I covered them. I know I covered all of them. They all took place in 2018. Well, those 3 wins. I know I covered them all. And I couldn't tell you anything about any of them. That's how memorable and relevant a fighter Corey Anderson is.
All right. I think any other pressing news items we should go over?
I think the last thing I wanted to touch on very briefly is Dana White has hired someone to help get Zuffa Boxing up and running. I think they have a launch date of October for this year.
So are they going to book and present their own boxing cards now, or?
I think so. Probably on Fight Pass. They will just.
Are they open to co-promoting with like Eddie Hearn or whatever, or what do they want to do here?
I don't know beyond that. I know that Dana said that they would be, bidding for boxing purses, which is an expensive proposition.
Some of the higher level boxers do make a lot, right?
Oh yeah. Look, you want to get someone like Deontay Wilder, Tyson Fury, Anthony Joshua. You want someone like them to fight on Fight Pass. You're going to pay them $30 million.
And that could tick off fighters.
That should piss off all the MMA fighters. So they're looking into it, and they apparently again have some kind of. And look, I'm not opposed to the existence of another kind of,
I'll believe it when I see it. Basically, yeah,
I'm with you there. But look, if this kind of catalyzes, some UFC fighters to actually do something about the state of their pay.
Look, if they don't like it, they got it. It's on them.
There's things they can do.
UFC. It's not the UFC's job to make sure they're unionized. You know.
It's not the UFC's job to give them the maximum amount that they're worth. It's their job to make, in some respects, it's their job to give them the minimum.
Well, we can probably argue that.
Long-term labor issues,
look,
labor philosophies aside.
I feel the same way about WWE, and this is kind of where I divert from the John Oliver piece is, the fighters, to me, the onus is on the fighters if they feel they're being mistreated. Fighters and pro wrestlers, if they feel they're being mistreated, they have to, and it has to be at every level. It can't just be a handful of dudes and whatever. But I don't know where this is going to go. It seems like he's on good terms with Eddie Hearn now. If they wanted to co-promote,
I mean, any boxing promoter or manager of talent will find any platform that they can reasonably get to give their fighters opportunities, as long as it's profitable for everyone. And Dana White giving another spot for their fighters to get paid and to be seen is not a bad thing.
I mean, look, they have a decent platform. If they
I think they have Roy Jones Jr.'s loose promotion, that kind of association that does boxing on Fight Pass.
In Fight Pass, I don't know what their numbers are, but they're well established. Fight Pass is, I think, a pretty reliable. At least I'm not a Fight Pass subscriber, but I think it's a decent service. Like,
when they actually go out of their way to do stuff with it, it's a perfectly fine service. I like the interface. I like the player. And
I mean that from, it's a good, it works well. It's reliable.
I have never had an issue on my end with it. Again, I like the player they have. Certainly better than the ESPN Plus one. I like the interface.
Right. Yeah, when I've tried Fight Pass, on the whole, I liked it better than ESPN Plus. And they have the relationship with ESPN Plus. So
there's a lot of different ways that could go. And
so if they wanted to, I could see how they could make it work. Is what I'm thinking. Will they do it, and can it work? I don't know. We'll see. I'm not convinced yet.
I imagine they'll have a go at it, but I don't know to the degree to which they'll be successful. There's some infrastructure issues that questions rather than issues that I want to see how they played out. But
from an infrastructure standpoint, I mean, ever since they completed the sale to WME, it just hasn't seemed as strong, just all across the board.
It
seems like they let a lot of important people go.
Important for certain aspects of the business, yes. Again, they fired everyone involved with Fight Pass, pretty much. Certainly the two people whose it was their brainchild. Mm-hmm. They were let go of not too long before the sale because, hey, we're moving to ESPN Plus. So I maintain this: if Fight Pass had not already been up and running when they made that sale, it would not exist. They just don't. Everything that they were doing on that,
even before the ESPN deal, pretty much after the WME buyout, as I recall.
Yeah, they were downsizing and removing a lot. They were doing a lot of personnel shifting even before that buyout.
It felt like you could see it in the marketing, especially because the marketing efforts did not seem as strong to me after the ESPN deal, after the WME deal.
Some of them, yeah. I mean, again, I've always taken issues with.
I don't know if this is true, but Ariel Helwani once expressed on a show that it was like a skeleton crew. I don't know. Now, this was a couple years ago, so it might have changed by this point, but that's what it was pre-ESPN.
There was probably a period of weeks or months when they were just between personnel that, yeah, there was probably the minimum number of people actually doing that job.
But it showed. It definitely showed. And I don't know. That's the thing about mergers. When mergers happen, people get fired, people lose their jobs,
Yep. Yeah, always happens. All right. I think that will be everything, unless there was anything else that you wanted to touch on. All right, let's go into plugs then. It's been a few weeks for you, so what's new? What did you get coming out of Comic-Con? What movies? Give me the details.
News are Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I don't know if you saw that yet.
Not yet.
Are you familiar with the Garth Ennis comic The Boys?
I've heard I need to read it. I have not read it yet. I do know that Amazon dropped season 1.
Postmodern superhero deconstruction.
Let me put it like this: I'm familiar with Ennis's work in kind of a loose sense.
I reviewed the show. I saw the premiere at Comic-Con, so this is part of my Comic-Con coverage. Was The Boys premiere? It's very much the Garth Ennis style, so very outrageous, over-the-top violence, almost cartoony level violence.
It can't be as. I say this not because that is a knock on the video on the series.
Yeah.
It cannot be as graphic as what Garth Ennis writes and draws. It just can't. That just doesn't fly.
The show definitely is.
I mean, I'm sure they go in that direction, but again, I
honestly, I thought this show captured the Garth Ennis style better than Preacher. Honestly,
I haven't seen enough Preacher.
I loved the Preacher comic. The show didn't do it for me. And I think a big part of that was AMC. They just couldn't. I think on AMC, even you can't do as much because it's still a basic cable network. So because this is a premium streaming show, they can get away with a lot more. Overall, I enjoyed the premiere. By this point, I've watched the rest of the season. I think it was a decent first season. It does change a lot in the second half, but they have a second season already in the works, so we'll see where it goes. Reviews, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Quentin Tarantino's latest. Have you seen it yet, Robert?
No, I'll be seeing it Tuesday before I review it.
On the whole, I liked it. Is it way too long? Most definitely. It's a 2-hour, 45-minute movie. This movie does not need to be 2 hours and 45 minutes. I think it could have been 2 hours and 20 minutes. And that's still a pretty long movie. Good performances by Brad Pitt and Leonardo DiCaprio. Editing, I think he could have had a bit more restraint with his editing. And of course, lots of bare feet. So very surprising to see lots of bare feet from women in a Tarantino movie. Don't you think, Rob?
I am shocked and appalled by this.
Are you really shocked?
I cannot believe that comes completely out of left field. Tarantino's never intimated anything like that before in his visual work.
Fair warning. Are Sharon Tate and the Manson family and Charles Manson in this movie? Yes. Is this movie about the Manson murders, Sharon Tate and the Manson family? No, it is not. This movie is about a fictional Hollywood actor and his sort of declining career in 1969 Los Angeles, and that's basically what the movie is about. So it's fictional characters and mixed in with some real characters in a couple real events, basically. But overall, a decent film. I would say go see it at least once. See what you think. The Lion King was awful. The remake, not the original. So it's making $1 billion. So what? It's still garbage. Next review will be Hobbs and Shaw, the Fast and Furious spinoff. I'm sure you're very excited about that.
I would rather die, but I'm going to see it.
You would rather die, but you're going to see it anyway. Good
if I die before I see it, I'm okay with that.
Wow. Okay, so check that review out.
I just don't need to see Roman Reigns ever under any circumstances.
And check out my other Comic-Con coverage stuff, my panel recaps, my interviews with The Witcher, cast and crew. Those are all up there in the movie section right now. So thank you, Robert, and I will check in with you next week.
All right. As for myself, last week, Mark Radulich, Alexis Hana, and I got together to review Disney's CGI'd version of The Lion King. None of us really cared for it. I think we all kind of agreed that the only decent thing is Eichner and Rogan as Timon and Pumbaa. Everything else, real iffy. Real iffy. And I just have to say again, whoever decided to do that to be prepared needs to be flogged publicly. This week we'll be reviewing Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Again, I haven't seen it yet, but we'll see. We'll see when I have to see it first. I was initially kind of hyped. Then I heard some of the things, and I've cooled a little. So I might feel better after I see it. I might feel worse.
What did you think of the Lion King remake?
There's no reason to watch it.
But why are people just so easily amused by these
I don't
Disney
know.
remakes that are horrendous?
People were easily amused by the Transformers franchise. People watch the Fast and the Furious movies. I don't know.
Even the Transformers movies, it wore out after a while.
Sure, it just took, 6 movies?
Yeah.
Well, there's 2 things I think that have helped Disney with their kind of remake policy as far as that goes. One is they've already had several that flopped.
Okay.
So the marketplace and the audience is very clearly picking and choosing which ones they want to go see and which ones they do not. So as opposed to Transformers, where, all right, we're going to see all of them, this is more, no one cares about Pete's Dragon, so no one's going to see Pete's Dragon.
Pete's Dragon did well.
As
I recall.
It loosely made its budget back, but, no one really saw it.
Oh, it didn't do that well.
Dumbo didn't do all that well.
Dumbo bombed.
Yeah, they've had a few that have just been straight up bombs. But anyone who saw, Beauty and the Beast or Cinderella or The Lion King as a kid in the animated version is probably going to check it out at least once.
It makes me angry, though.
I mean,
there was no soul in that Lion King film. And the performances were so stiff.
Oh, they were bad.
And what did they do to be prepared was...
It's, in my opinion, it is the best Disney villain song there is, period. And they did that to it. And
what we saw in the film was, and look, I highly respect Chiwetel Ejiofor. He's a great actor.
Genuinely great actor.
That was not it, man. That was not good.
I don't know how much of that was direction. I don't know how much of that was on the actors. I don't know.
I expect Beyonce to be a little stiff and clunky in terms of acting, but Donald Glover, I think you would agree, is like a good performer. He's a good, talented performer. Even he sounded disinterested throughout with his vocals.
I'm pretty convinced Donald Glover was there. They could only afford Donald Glover for one day. So he just read it once, and they just took his first take on everything.
But and Jon Favreau is a good director too. On the whole, I think a talented.
He's even directed a similar movie to this one in terms of CGI composition with The Jungle Book. That was much better than this.
The Jungle Book actually had live in-camera material. This was all created via computer.
Yeah, I don't know where all the points of failure were for this movie, but there were a lot of them, and they hit all of them. Every possible bump in the road.
But it doesn't matter because it's doing great.
Yeah, it'll make a lot of money. It's probably going to make $1 billion. Aladdin made $1 billion, and there's not very much to that.
Did you see Aladdin?
I did.
Now, that Jasmine song, it doesn't fit in that movie.
Nope.
And then they try to make Jasmine this strong character, and then she gets her legs cut out from under her whenever they try to do that. So I'm what kind of point are you even making here?
I think Jasmine in that movie is what a lot of stupid men think feminism is. There's someone at the table who goes, "We have to have a feminist character," and this is the best they could come up with. And I'm not normally the type of guy that,
some feminists liked it and are promoting that.
Sure. Most of the feminists I know have pointed out all the major flaws with the characterization in that role rather than being very happy about it.
I'm just saying, like, that, putting that song in the middle of the movie, it didn't fit because it doesn't fit the style of the rest of the movie or the songs for the rest of the movie. And that song had no impact on the plot at all. So it was kind of pointless.
There's a lot of that. Yeah.
I mean, because the rest of the music and songs in the movie were composed by different artists, and you can tell. Because it doesn't sound like the other songs in the film.
That's true. So, yeah, you can...
I like this.
Yeah, if you're...
Show.
So if you're interested in my full thoughts, again, you can find our review of The Lion King this weekend. It's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which will be the... Mark and I reviewed Hateful Eight, too, so if you want to go into the archives, you can find that from a couple of years ago. We both really enjoyed that one. Well,
what are your thoughts on women's feet in Tarantino films?
In Tarantino's films? I mean, look, if all parties are... if everyone knows what's up, go for it. I don't care. I'm not gonna... Again,
Feet, dirty soles, and toes. Lots of that in this film.
Look.
You're going to see more of Margaret Qualley's and Margot Kidder's feet than you ever wanted to see.
I will prepare myself.
Hey, you know what? Whatever.
Again, look, if everyone knows what's up, go for it. I don't care.
I mean, Margot Qualley didn't seem to have a problem with it.
Again, if all parties are aware of what's going on and whatnot, then you know what? Go for it. I don't care.
Margot Robbie's not going to do anything she's not cool with on a movie set at this point.
I would hope, that you should always, that should be the case, always, but certainly given her level of notoriety.
Now, Uma Thurman was bullied into doing that driving sequence, so.
That's true. I'm not very cool with that, but.
I'm not either, but.
I mean, it's also kind of the movie business, directors and actors clash all the time, and if you're really not happy with it, don't sign the contract.
Yep.
And if you're really unhappy after you've signed the contract, you can get out of it. Like there are clauses built in for that. So, okay, if everyone basically went along with it and such, then you know what? Again, just whatever.
I think you're going to like the film, Robert.
We'll see.
Did you like Hateful Eight?
More or less.
Have you watched the Netflix TV version, which is like an alternate cut?
No, I have not seen that yet.
Okay.
I mean, Tarantino's good about getting good performances out of actors, and I'm looking forward to the camaraderie between DiCaprio and Brad Pitt more than anything else. So,
I think you're going to enjoy that then.
There's elements of this movie I fully expect to enjoy. I imagine there's a few things I'm not going to as well, but that's kind of par for the course. All right, and then let me think, what else do I have? And then Saturday, of course, coverage for UFC on ESPN 5, and next week we'll be back here to review that and to preview UFC on ESPN Plus 14. This will be the promotion's debut in the country of Uruguay, and you know what? Those top two fights are actually pretty darn good.
We should have a show where we only talk about Goblin Slayer.
Look, starting a podcast is very easy. If you want to have a Goblin Slayer podcast, I would encourage you to do so.
Okay. Would you talk about Goblin Slayer with me, though?
Maybe not.
We can talk about what type of alignment he should have. What type of D&D alignment.
Just for kicks, I'd argue he's true neutral.
Anyway,
so yeah, next We'll be previewing that card next week. That's headlined by Valentina Shevchenko and Liz Carmouche. And the co-main event is Vicente Luque and Mike Perry. So those are good fights. I can't say that about the rest of the card, really.
His official alignment is chaotic good.
That's probably again, I'd argue something else just to argue the point, but chaotic good is probably correct. He ignores a lot of stuff and has a very defined view of right and wrong, but eschews a lot of the order versus chaos. He's just not really interested in a lot of structure.
I brought down the actual list of chaotic good, and there are a couple contradictions and anachronisms, but yeah, there you go.
Chaotic. That's my one. Look, you're not chaotic if there's not some contradiction in there. I mean, isn't Drizzt technically chaotic good? I'm pretty sure he is. Anyway, that's what we'll be back here next week to talk over, so I hope you'll all join us again for that. Until then, nice to have Jeff back. He should be back next week. I look forward to talking with him again. Stay safe out there, everybody. Thank you for sharing us with your friends. Thank you for subscribing to the 411 Podcasting Network. However you get your on-demand audio, please give us a listen. Yes, this is the part where I beg for money. Interact with the product however you can. Give us a comment, a thumbs up. Give us a thumbs down if you think we really suck. Give us a review if you have a star review from 1 to 5. I don't care what. Just give me something. If it's 1, give me 1. If you can get it to go down to just half a star, go for it. Just interact with the product somehow. It helps with the algorithm, and the algorithm will control all within the next 30 years. So let's all try to make it happy. And please continue to be well, be safe, and behave.